Hi, welcome to another episode of Tim's Garage. Today we are changing a wheel bearing on this Ford Capri. Lucky enough in this video to have my parents up visiting. My dad is a truck driver but is also a trained mechanic who does a lot of services on his own truck, so he was able to help with some of the technical parts of this job which were far beyond my capabilities, so it was great to have him here. We're very simply undoing the wheel. You do that while that's on the ground, then just using a drill just to loosen them off a little bit more. We then chock up the back of the car, and using our jack we raise the car so it's nice and safe. Of course we'll use some jack stands a little bit later.
Let's just grab it.
Now we remove the wheel now that the car is up on the jack stand. Now we found that there was a punch that we needed to push out that sits on the main nut that connects to your drive shaft. Now we needed to file down a punch so that we were able to fit that in there, and here you see us hammering out the divot. That divot's simply there just to hold that main nut from coming off. We then brace it and undo the main nut, exposing the end of the drive shaft, which we need to get to. So we've just taken off our main bolt, which is 1 1/8" socket. Some of the sockets on there are quite an obscure size, so it helps if you know what size you're using before you start the job. We were just lucky enough to find that in the bottom of a discarded toolbox, so that worked for us. We're now going to take off the brake caliper, which at the very back there's 2 sets of bolts. There's a 17mm and a 14mm. The 17mm actually is for disassembling the brake hub if you're changing your pads, but we're actually just pulling this off, and we're going to let that sort of sit so we can just take off your wheel, your brakes and your hub there. So 14mm socket. Both those. So short one was at the top, long one is at the bottom. Somehow if you can put them in something so you remember. Take your piece. Just going to sit that on that strap. The main reason is this hose is your brake line hose, and I kind of don't want to stretch that or put tension on it, because if you snap that, the brake fluid goes and you die. We're now just using a gear puller to pull the brake and that hub off from the drive shaft, removing them. Okay, that was it. Oh, that was caught on. Let's find out.
Probably the seal, actually, mate.
Oh, that's what it was. So is that the seal left in there?
That's interesting.
No, I've heard of that. I've heard the sometimes, because they're a single unit,
yeah,
the back half of the seal gets stuck. Which is what that'll be.
Yeah.
Which means we're going to have to take that off. Hammer that out. That'll be fun. So there's the.
So that's. Oh, you're going to have to take the. Yep.
Now we're just taking off some of the major bolts that are holding the end of that wheel assembly on. There's some fairly large nuts that hold the shock assembly together, and some of the lower control arms and those kind of things.
Got it. Beautiful. Because it's tapered, it's only got to move a fraction of an inch and it's loose.
Yeah,
but you can't just. And by hitting it on the weakest part of the circle, all you're doing is springing it. You know, you hold pressure on it and just make a little spring.
Basically, we've taken off our brakes, our main sort of the hub assembly of the car, and what's happened is here, if you look at the back of the hub, you'll see that this part, which is actually your bearing, has no cover. That assembly should be one piece, and I'll show you what the other piece looks like in a minute when we open our new set. That should be covered with another piece, so that would just slide on there usually. So what we've discovered is two things. One, these brakes are terrible, because if you ever need to change them, you've got to pull this off, which potentially will damage your bearing. For bolts from the back, that's a pain. But this part is now lodged securely in the rest of your shock assembly. Yay, fun. Also fun is trying to use a camera with greasy fingers. But this part here, if you can see that in there, that shiny part there is the back of the wheel bearing. Yay, fun. So that's just pulled its way out. So now we've undone 2 bolts. If you've watched some of my other videos, you'll notice this shock tower, very much like lowering springs. This car has aftermarket springs on it, which have been lowered, but undoing those, which is great. If you watched the drive shaft job on the MPS, you'll notice this is very similar. Drive shaft runs to your car back here. There's the boot, there's the shaft going into the car. Underneath right now, what we're doing is undoing control steering arms, lower control arm. This has got a one piece, which is much more standard in cars. It's like a triangular piece control arm, and so we've undone 1 bolt on there. Now we're undoing the other, which strangely it has a nut on the bottom and a nut on the top. That's not normal. That's okay. That's what we're dealing with. So once we've finished undoing that nut, that will all come free. We'll pop these 2 screws out. That will all come off. We can then start working at removing the back of that. We'll then remove our old bearing, and we'll begin to put our new bearing kit together, replacing anything that needs replacing. While this is out, I noticed this brake pad has some weird wear. It feels weird the way that it's worn, so we're gonna sand that back a little bit. It's not a worn pad. There's no major gaps in there, and there's no major lips on it, so it's not a bad pad. It's just worn strange. So we're gonna see if we can fix that.
Trouble is, I'm used to doing truck ones where you can actually, which are that big, and you can hold them up to the light and you can often see the rough spot inside where the case hardening's gone off. It takes absolutely nothing to make them noisy. It can be I don't know how to explain it. You know, a little mark on there will make a noise. So you haven't actually done it for nothing. There is a rough spot.
Good.
Hole in the boot on the inside one too, Tim.
Oh, do we?
See there? Probably that you're this close.
we've just removed the old boot that was sitting on there. The whole end was, the entire end had come off that. So that was definitely broken. We've removed the entire CV joint, which, here, which is all, I've had a pretty good go cleaning that out, which is all good. So keeping that together. Now I'm just going to clean up the end of this, get that looking all nice and schmick and clean. The only other thing on this car that wasn't shown in the video because we kind of got carried away and time ran away, is once we pulled the brake off, which was on this end, once that all came off, this was hanging loose, but this was also attached to the end of this. That end goes into your gearbox. This end bolts under your car. If I was looking at the car, that would have been bolted in like so. Getting the bolts out, and then that goes into that end. So the boot wraps around there. So we're going to also clean that out, which will be great. And then that's looking clean. Then we're good to reassemble it. In your boot kit you'll get a grease bag, which I'll show you in a second, and we'll use that to put on as well. Let's feed it through that little lip. There.
We've gone around twice.
Yep.
And then put it through there and pinch those over.
Yep.
And then just squash that. We'll squash that onto it to hold the end. We'll bend it and bend the tail back.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Understand?
Yep. How does this actually work? Explain the CV joint to us.
The CV joint is just on the steering. So for the suspension, mainly for the suspension.
Yeah.
So you can have the independent suspension on the front.
Yep.
That'll go up and down. So that just turns. But if you're going through a hole, that's it's not a great lot of movement, but it's got to have some movement. Otherwise, it'd just spring on the axle if you didn't have a CV joint. Once this is sealed up, that's the only lubrication it's going to have for the rest of its life, working life. Just hold it. Yeah, thanks, mate. We'll just put a lid.
That's what we're going to put the drive shaft back into, and that's there, the
I guess. Yep.
1, 2, 3 bolts.
Put them there.
Filter. That's all the crud that's come from our cracked. Man, there's a lot of crud in that alternator.
Use cold chisel punch. Do one side at a time, so it comes out. Oh, there you go. Easy as that. And we remove the old cup. And we'll give it a bit of a wipe. Now, a bit of a trick is to get your old bearing cup.
Yeah.
And lay it on the new one. And use it as a drift. Not like that. Right, Tim. The next thing we've got to to do is pack this bearing. We've got the new seal out of the bag, and we've got the bearing cup. We use proper wheel bearing grease, probably Timken bearing grease. Apparently wheel bearing grease has got a bit better, I don't know whether it's a shock loading or what it is, but the normal grease, so that the grease sticks in there a bit better. But force a bit of grease in there into the rollers if you can. Sometimes I put a bit in there and set the bearing in like that, just give it a bit of a thing, and get the grease behind it and sort of pull it back up through it. You can see it's starting to coming up there. We're putting the seal in now. Now, if you're in a, just give my hands a bit of a wipe, in a perfect world, and you had all the right, just put the lid back on that so it doesn't get fruit in it. In a perfect world, if you had all the right drifts and had to put a seal in, that's the way to go. But if you're just doing it at home by yourself, like we are here, the old seal is probably good. The old seal, you just lay it over the new one, and that's, of course, it's perfectly the right size, and you can hit the new seal in with your old one, because your old one's had it, doesn't matter.
We went to reattach the brake assembly back in, but realised that it was way too tight. For some reason, new bearings are so tight that they won't fit. So we're just using some different gauge emery paper to file that back so that they fit much more snug. So we got the wheel done up, just to find there was a little bit of wobble in there, which means we had too many spaces between the two gaskets. There you can see my dad pulling out one of those spaces. We put the wheel back together and we'll see if there's any play in it this time. Squeak's gone.
Oh, that's good. Is that really?
Yeah, just ever so slight, enough that I notice it. So the bearing's done, the wheels all back together. It's quite an involved job. I'm really happy that I wasn't here to do this one on my own. And this is quite a risky job as well. So I'd really encourage you, if you are looking at doing something like the bearings on your wheels, that you do either run it past your dad if he's a mechanic, or you get somebody to look at it who actually knows what they're doing. The kit's quite comprehensive, but the instructions are designed for somebody who actually knows what they're doing a little bit more. So the DIY part is just to make sure that you're safe. As a part of this, we also had to replace a boot on the CV joint. And so if you're interested in seeing that as a separate video in a bit more detail, click here, and that's it. Cheers, thank you. Cheers, thank you. See you next time on Tim's Garage. Subscribe. That's my mum saying tea's ready.